Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome newcomers to the Facebook group and podcasts. We absolutely love hearing the diverse reasons why teachers are joining our podcasts and using Teachific resources. So from a few teachers and school leaders, some of the reasons for joining. The podcast and resources were recommended by a team teacher. Happy to hear that recommendations are helpful for people. As a literacy coach, I'm looking for both big ideas in terms of whole school literacy plans and small scale resources for teachers. Fantastic. We're really trying to cater for all of you. This is a graduate teacher who's keen to learn different ways that they can support students in literacy and learn all that I can. Love the enthusiasm of that. And from a school leader, quality research and practice. So if you're not a member of the Teachers Toolkit Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. But now, welcome to today's podcast called Top Tips for Teaching with Literature. And welcome back, big welcome back to Kate Tucker, teacher and literacy leader, although I think facilitator is the word that's used, at Mount Barker South Primary School in South Australia. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Always love having you. We had you with the team last time.
My peer teacher and another middle primary teacher.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. So we've got you here on your own today.
Yes.
Maybe a bit more airtime for you, Kate. But actually, in answer to the literacy coach who said they're looking for both big ideas in terms of whole school literacy and the small scale ideas, that's where today this is great because, Kate, you bring both of those things to this. You are both classroom teacher 4 days a week and literacy leader or literacy facilitator 1 day a week. So, and I think you've got the same year level as last time you were on.
Yes.
Year 5, 6.
I've got just sixes this year.
Oh, just sixes.
Straight sixes.
I did not even know that.
Yeah.
There I was in that room. Did not realise.
Yeah.
Has Ra got 5, 6s?
Ra's got 5, 6s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. Just a little chat there on the side. All right. So it's start of the school year. So what are we? A few weeks in as we record. So how's the year started?
Busy as normal, normal start of the year. So we've had our we do a 2-week back program at our school. So we've basically had probably 5 weeks of our learning programs underway. So still finding our feet, I guess, getting those structures and expectations into our programming, not just in literacy but across the school. So I definitely think in the next week or so we'll definitely be picking up on the learning side of things a little bit more. But
yeah. And it has been a good and busy start
Very
to the
much
year.
so.
And you've had quite a bit of change in staff and shifting at year levels.
Yes.
So all of those things always bring, everyone listening will completely understand all of that going, and yes, that's how a year begins with all of those changes.
Yeah.
Changes
I've had a few new
place.
teachers in and a few teachers swapping year levels that they're teaching. So a lot of new teams working together. Yeah. So it always takes a couple of weeks to get that sorted out as well.
Yes, yeah. So today, the topic, as we called it, I have to say it's a very alliterative today, isn't it? Top tips for teaching with literature, Kate Tucker.
Glad you're saying it, not me.
So when we think about why are we bringing this topic to you today, so a few reasons. One is to be thinking about how does a school intentionally and effectively resource a year-long approach to the teaching of writing within a school. When we talk about resourcing it, we're talking about resourcing it with literature because we're saying that literature has a really critical role in the teaching of writing to our students. We are going to be in conversation about how, as teachers, we want to use quality literature actively in our reading and our writing workshops, and why we do this and how can we do it effectively. How we plan for Oh, and I've already mentioned this, and resource, the teaching of really planning out, and we'll talk about how at Mount Barker South you really plan out units of connected writing and reading. So students are able to really be reading like writers, and then of course write as if they were readers, understanding that focus of what they're doing for their audience. And then we'll go into some of the top tips for being successful in teaching and coaching others in this process. So, Kate, last year, school really launched into thinking about plotting out. You'd already, as a school, sort of had a plan for your imaginative, informative and persuasive writing across a year. But last year, that was broken down even further, so that you've got that into what were longer units. The year before, you started breaking it down into smaller units, like 5-6 week long units. So in plotting those out, you really looked at across the year levels. It was really making sure that there were 3. So you've got that sort of beginning of year settling in and getting routines and expectations set up. But then you really looked at 3 imaginative, 3 informative and 1 persuasive unit.
Yes, that's right.
Each 5 weeks long across the year levels.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so we do the first 2 weeks is about building our community of readers and writers. So all year levels undertake that process, and that's just about getting them to understand what it means to be a good writer, a good reader, and what our expectations are. And obviously that's very diverse from our R1 classes to our year 6 classes. And then from there we have 2 units every term that we undertake. So they roughly 5 weeks, and we aim to stick within that 5 weeks. The only difference is with term 1 we have poetry at the end for the last couple of weeks, and then we spend a couple of weeks at the end of term 4 with that unit, but the rest of them are all aiming to be 5 weeks. So we used to do term long ones, so now we've scaled them back and really prioritised what the needs are and followed a bit more of a cycle to make sure that we're getting to that presentation stage has been a big focus.
Yes, now that's an important piece that you are being intentional about here too, that we'll just mention briefly, is that for each of the units, students are going through the writing process.
Yes.
For each unit. There's one element in particular that I think you've really focused on, and that is the revising.
Correct.
Getting students really revising their writing to not just be learning about the type of writing, but to really make decisions across those areas of the writing traits, really starting to develop, organisation and ideas and sentence fluency and all of those writing trait elements to be improving in those areas. Yeah. So in going through the writing process in all of those different types of writing, you were also quite strategic as a school to think about the connections to the Australian curriculum.
Correct.
And therefore, what kinds of imaginative writing, what kinds of informative writing students were doing at different year levels, so it wasn't the same thing year upon year.
So we have a genre map that is scoped out. So instead of doing year level bands, we do it in our team name. So early years, lower primary, middle primary, senior learning centre. And the reason for it is we make sure that we've got enough different variety for students, that they aren't getting that repetition each year, that are getting a different focus. So if we've got persuasive, everyone does persuasive at some point throughout the year, but there's a different element of persuasion. So one might be, sell it in a campaign, one might be using a speech. So we're just showing over the range from reception to year 6 the different ways that you can use persuasion. So that's been a really big focus. And then the other connection we're doing is, once we've plotted out our different genres and what the sub-focus will be under that, is the teachers in the teams are able to allocate where they would like to teach those units, and they often bring in other subjects. So, for example, I know the middle primary are doing recount and they're doing journal entries from convicts, so they're doing it at the same time that they're doing that in history. So they're making connection between multiple subjects at the same time to show students the connection between that as well. So the teachers were a huge part of choosing their areas based on that as well.
Yeah, and nice planning in that way to see where the connections are and to be able to plot things according to how those things can be connected, so absolutely. They're not in isolation. Okay, so you've plotted out, so you've really got that sort of text type or genre map for the year. And then, of course, the curriculum also makes it quite clear to us about how we want students to be able to use literature, to be able to know how to write effectively and write with voice and idea and organisation in ways beyond it being a templated piece of writing.
Correct.
So that's where we really land on today's topic now, but we just needed to give that little bit of background of where this is sitting, that with that genre map then, with all the different text types and the different types of text types that students were going to be engaging in, one of the things that I just completely admire, we say to Kate, well, now teachers really need resources to be able to be intentional and teach these effectively by having some good literature and some good text to work with. And so in a very offhanded kind of way, now it's Kate's job and Kate sets up and does it. So great. I really want to acknowledge Kate's leadership in this way, and we'll acknowledge Cassie, the principal's leadership in this, in saying, right, this will be funded, and your time as facilitator, you've spent a lot of time really upskilling yourself, your knowledge around the world of literature that is available for teaching across all of those different types of text. So we are really going to pick your brain, Kate. Okay. We're really going to pick your brain. You really worked unit by unit to begin with, because
unit by
you
unit,
were...
year level by year band by year band.
Yeah, you've now got 4-year band.
And there's 15 units per year band that they cover, and then there's roughly about 5 books per unit.
Yes.
So a lot of resources.
Yes. So where does one start with that, Kate?
To be honest, I reflect and think I don't know where I started either. I literally probably just started 1 unit at a time, and I thought probably the one that I was most familiar with first. So I started with poetry, actually. So we started out by scoping out what poetry would look like across the bands, what type of poems they would cover. So then if a student was at our school from R to 6, they've got that complete scope. And then I started sourcing texts or poems that suited that type of poetry. So that ranged from mostly hard copy texts, and then there was also some other resources that we used as well, but most of them have been actual textbooks.
Yes. Yeah. So you looked for some resources in the school?
Yes, so I started within the school because I wanted to use what we have available already.
Yes.
I then also, all our classrooms have classroom libraries, and a lot of that has been sourced by our individual teachers, so I used a lot of that as my second point. I then spoke to colleagues about if they put out like a little survey or questionnaire to staff to see if they knew of any text that would suit or they could recommend. And then from there, I literally just started searching. And that was from a Google search to Booktopia emails to reading book reviews, a wide range of different angles I took to do that until I found enough text to support the teachers, but also a vast enough range to cover from R to 6 as well. So, yes. And it is still ongoing. I definitely have not finished. I probably started July last year, and at that point last year I was probably 1 unit ahead of the teachers and trying to play catch up. And the way our school works, we have a even and odd year cycle of our genres as well. So when I say 15 units, that's over 2 years. So I had to, find that. And then so at the moment I'm trying to do the rest of the text. So to fill in the rest of the even year and then try and finish off the odd year. So it's definitely a long process, but the feedback that I've received from the staff and the way that I can seamlessly see it transitioning into our reading and writing, it's definitely been worth it.
Yes. Yeah. And, and the intentionality of it has been, the teachers have absolutely appreciated the, and it's about having that bigger picture view of it too, to say, if, let's say poetry, for example, as a year whatever teacher, and I'm thinking, well, poetry, right, I'll do what I'm doing or that I know. Yep. But this idea that everybody, not at the same time necessarily, but that everybody's engaging in poetry, and that I get as a teacher, the joy on a teacher's face the other day when you gave that box of books to say, right, here's a box of poetry texts that you can use with your students was just complete joy. Yeah. No fear in that. It was just like, oh, I get to work with these texts. And so this doesn't take away. There's still teachers that will choose their own texts and will bring those in. Oh, actually, I just want to finish off the point that I was going to make, is that by mapping out over the 2 years, you're bringing such a rich experience to your children across their life.
Yes, absolutely.
At school, that they get to read and write in all of those different ways, and therefore in their life know that they get to choose. They've got this whole bank of experiences that they've had across all of the different types of imaginative or informative or persuasive, to go, wow, I've got this huge repertoire of things to draw on, you know, as I'm older, or going into secondary and going beyond, where it's just been, you know, a full-scale, rich experience planned out for them. And so the books have been an absolutely critical part of that, and we know it's a big job.
Yeah.
And I was only reflecting on, you know, like, when was my equivalent moment in life about that? Was, you know, when I was doing some graduate study, and it was like we were really having to expand our repertoire and our knowledge of children's literature. And there is no other way around it than getting your eyes on it and doing it. Yeah. And I know, just talk a little bit about what you feel you've gained from that experience.
So I, obviously, as a child, I liked reading. I liked being read to, all of that. Probably over my teenage years, it wasn't something that I continued on, but as I've got older, I've definitely got back into it. So for me, I have learnt so much about texts, about authors, about genres, just about the styles of writing, all of that stuff. I've learnt so much. And when I first did the end of last year, I did some reflecting and thought, you know, I feel a little bit selfish in a way that I've been able to give myself all of this exposure, and then my teachers, I'm just then handing them the book. So I actually did at the end of last year, I sat down with my literacy action team, and we all sat down, and I gave them the opportunity to have a look around as well, and, you know, jump on Booktopia or jump on, you know, a Google search and try and find. And they did appreciate that as well, because I think they got a voice in what they were using as their mentor text, but also they were able to expand their ideas a little bit as well. And obviously time was something that we didn't have a lot of for them to be able to continue that, but they definitely were able to have a say in that. And I guess then that leads into, you know, I try and aim for 5-6 books as a mentor text set for them to begin the topic, but knowing the strategies that I took and some of the process I took, they can now do that with their mentor text. So they're not limited to the ones that I give them. They can absolutely add their own to that as well. And sometimes that's good, because it means it's a book that they're familiar with, that they like, and then as anyone who's reading it or sharing it with someone, you're so much more passionate when you have connection to it. So they've been able to do that as well, which I think has been, you know, really beneficial.
Yes. And I think by giving them that sample of books to actually work with, it's also knowing, oh, that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm noticing, and that's what I'm...
And I think that's what most of them were kind of said, was like, I just didn't know really where to start, but having that starting point gives me somewhere to go from there. Yeah. So a lot have said that has been really beneficial. Yeah.
And to think that over 2 years, over 15 units, they've now been exposed to books themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
That where would have they found them for themselves? Yep. Where would have, like, we acknowledge it was a big process, but such a valuable process. Yeah. Yep. And as coach, you know, being able to, or literacy facilitator, being able to, you know, share information about books, to, you know, that what you've gained from that is absolutely being translated into information sharing with the teachers and getting them invested. I think that's where you got the buy-in.
Absolutely. Well, if I had said to them, right, off you go, you need to find 5 persuasive books that follow campaign, I don't think I would have got the buy-in as I have when I've given them a bit of a head start. Like, these are some ones to go with. And because the aim is that they'll teach us every 2 years. So the aim is, you know, your first time you just want to use the 5-6 there. When you come back to it next time, you've got more knowledge about those books, and then you think, you know, I could also add this, or I could add this as well. Yes, so it's definitely an ongoing process.
Yes. Now, just whilst we're there, talk about how you've organised those books so that your teachers have access to them. And Kate's rolling her eyes at the moment.
Storage has been a little tight.
Because that's another whole process. Yes. But like with our students, you thought through all of these things about how do you make it accessible? Yes. How do you make this, work
Yep.
for people. So
Yeah. So they're all stored, all the tubs are stored within our library at the moment. The storage isn't 100% finished yet. It's definitely an ongoing thing. So each unit has its own tub and it's clearly labelled. So it might say lower primary, poetry, odd, term 2, so that they know that, right, this is what I do in odd year, this is my term 2, and all the books are allocated in that box. At the start of each unit, one of my literacy action team members will go and borrow that tub from the library, and underneath that borrowing has got all the titles, and then they take that tub away for their 5-week unit, and then at the end they then return it back. So we store it all together so that, because obviously it's only used once every 2 years, so we wanted to make sure it was in a communal spot everyone has access to, and then it's something that we don't want to lose these books. We want to keep them and keep them all together. So, yeah, that has been a bit of a trickier part to it, but definitely worth it. And, having that fear of putting all this into the classroom, all this time you've spent, students will see a book and think, I just want to quickly read that, or teacher, I'll just quickly borrow that, and all of a sudden we're losing those books. So it was really important for us that we had that base where we could store them all as well.
Yes, yeah. And I suppose actually that's a point too, that, if there are books that are really, if you want to have them in the school library as well.
Yes, there's multiple ones that we've got
as
books that the students can borrow and as teacher reference text as well.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of students will hear it there and then they want to go home and share it with their family or reread it. So probably half of our books, maybe just under, are also accessible for daily borrowing in our library as well.
Isn't that fabulous? Yeah. And it has been complete joy to see teachers' excitement at getting that collection of books. And I suppose because a year down the track now, well, not even a year down the track, everyone's getting to a bigger understanding of how they're using these books as. So we're really talking about them. Do you use the term mentor text as these?
Yes.
Yep. And so 5 or 6 is good, isn't it? Gives a bit of a range.
Yeah,
but
we found it's really important that they're exposing them to different authors and different types within that. Rather, if we just had the 1 text or the 2 texts, they're not getting enough exposure within that genre. And, even in my site, we're doing sci-fi narrative at the moment in Year 6. We had Charlie and the Glass Elevator, and we only read him a couple of chapters of it. We didn't read him the whole book because we wanted to give him a taste of it, or we wanted to show a certain element. But then if the students are really interested, we've got a couple now lining up to say, like, we've got a list of 4 or 5 of them that now want to borrow that book and keep reading it. So sometimes the mentor text isn't about completing the whole book. It's about intriguing your audience to want to keep reading it.
Yeah, and that's a nice point, really good point about, some nice tips and tricks around how those mentor texts can be used. Yeah. It won't always be the whole book being used, and sometimes just enough, especially with longer texts, that there will be elements of that will be used to show the craft or the aspect that you're teaching in that unit. And other times it will be a whole book being used, but that's
last
the
unit
nice
we did it
choice, isn't it?
Yeah, last unit we did it as a class reading book as well. So we had a novel that was ongoing with that fit with our genre, and then we had other mentor texts that we used throughout our reading and writing workshops as well.
And I really like that. I wanted you to talk about that they can be used in those different ways, that sometimes they are the read aloud and the ongoing, sometimes it's the dip into and find the pieces that we want to use from there. I'm just jumping back to poetry as well, which I think we might have talked about this last time, but I think it's still a really important thing to talk about, is that you ordered for each class as well a poetry anthology.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
I just think that's something that's just so evident, in everybody's day. So did you do that by year bands? No. How did you do the anthologies for classrooms?
I did it by their team teaching groups.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like our R1s together in our early years. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So did each of them get the same anthology?
No. It was the teachers had a bit of a say in what they thought would be beneficial to their year band, rather than myself just going out and kind of choosing for them. Yeah.
And they use those as an everyday.
Yeah. So it was weekly. Yeah, weekly read. So at the moment, this term, it's just everyone's going into poetry units starting next week. So it hasn't been, that was something we did more last year. It will get started once we've done the poetry unit this term, and then it will lead on from there. So
yes, nice. Yes, because I'm just eyeballing a poetry anthology right there that just made me think that's been a nice, and that nice element of poetry being there as a text type all through the year.
Yeah.
You know, that it's something that can connect with everything that's
And some people are
as
just
well.
using that, like we have like during eating time, they might just pull a poem and read there. Some might just do it as, last 10 minutes of the day. Some wind down time, they read something there. So they're very like unintentional points where they deliver that poetry as well. And it doesn't always have to be connected to a writing or reading lesson, and that's what we've been working on.
And that's about access too, that every teacher's got access to that right there, or a child saying, oh, can we just read a poem now? So that it's readily
And I think
available.
sometimes children can be scared off by the word poetry, and I think by doing it so regularly.
Teachers too sometimes.
Actually.
Yes,
Definitely
yes.
So I think by doing it so regularly as well, we get rid of that stigma a little bit.
Yes, yeah. It just becomes part. It's a very natural part of their week, their lives, actually. Yeah. Okay, so organisation, so tubs, they're just a plastic tub, aren't they, that you store them in?
Yep.
Yes,
Plastic
labelled, done.
Yeah,
yes.
Nothing fancy.
Yeah, but effective. That's all it needs to be. Is
they're purposeful, and they do their job, and that's what we need them to do. So
yeah. Fantastic. Have any teachers felt like they've needed how to use the books? Have you done any work with teachers on how they might use books?
So we've done at the end of last year, I haven't done one this year, but the end of last year I did a staff meeting with all teachers so I gave a little demonstration, a practical demonstration about how I align a mental text to a writing, it was a reading workshop, and I demonstrated the connection that I made from that to how then I would deliver it to my class. So we've done a couple like that. It is definitely something in term 2 that I've spoken to my action team about, that I do want to do more of that practical demonstration stuff as well. But I am mindful that I didn't want to do it too much early in term 1 because everyone's still trying to get their systems and routines. And I think you've got to find the right time to do it to make sure that it has the biggest effect on the staff as well. So that is definitely something that we're doing in term 2, and the teachers will also be able to have a say in what they would like demonstrated or get some more ideas on or tips and tricks. And then I'll also be asking other teachers, not just myself, to help model that as well, because I think it's really important that it doesn't all come from me. And, I'm a year 6 teacher, so it'd be great to see, the early years come up and show how they do it, and then we can, adjust that for older year levels if needed. So
yes,
that's a term 2 project, that one.
Yes, yeah. And that brings us to, so as classroom teacher, like you're not just sourcing this for everybody else to be using, you are 4 days a week using your text across the reading and the writing workshops.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the things you've learned. So the idea of mentor text. So before, what would have you used to teach?
We did a lot of Google searching.
Right.
So I think in this day and age, it's so easy to literally type anything to Google and up it comes. And that's why I think for me, the biggest learning thing is the value and the response, I guess the amount of response I get from the students about having a physical book in my hands and reading or showing it wasn't anything that I thought. I thought, they won't really notice too much, whether it's on the screen or hand. But, that's probably my biggest eye-opener that I have seen. And it's probably taught me that not everything is on Google, and it's so important that we still have those hard copies to show what a book looks like, what it feels like, the illustrations and all of that. So that's probably been my biggest eye-opener.
And access to it, ongoing access. It's
and that's why I think the mentor text was so important, that we did have ongoing access to them, because the internet is an ongoing access thing, whereas the mentor text, if it's not there and available, it's easy to say, I'll just search this up or...
Yes, yeah. And I've noticed in your room, you usually have a display of the books.
Yep, so we have a little display based on the genre that we are currently doing, and then within that as well, we might have vocab words, and we might have illustrations, or if there's poetry, it might be about haiku, so we might have a few example stuff of that up on the wall as well that students can connect to. So we try and make it a whole focus from our reading and writing. And a visual display as well,
Yeah. And how have you found the connecting the reading and the writing through the mentor text?
To begin with, the very first topic I did was persuasive speeches, and be honest, it probably wasn't my best one to start on, considering it was my first go at trying to merge them together, and I found it really difficult. But then the next topic we did was narrative. We did historical fiction, and I just couldn't, like, the difference. I don't know whether it was because I'd already had one go at trying to do it, but narrative lent itself a lot easier to be able to do that. But I've done persuasion since, and it was much better the second time. But I actually was really, I guess, shocked how easily they can cross over and making that connection between the two. And I think that's really important for the students to see that as well, that they're not seeing that reading is this and writing is this, or I'm good at reading but I'm not good at writing, and seeing that seamless transition between the two. So the way that we teach in my Senior Learning Centre is I have the 6s and my fellow teacher Ra has the 5/6s, and we do our mini lesson together. So for 5 weeks she will run the writing, and for 5 weeks I'll run the reading, and then for the next unit we swap over. So all of my students will go into her class for the 10-minute mini lesson, and
along
then
with you.
Yep.
Yeah,
so all of us together. Yep. 2 teachers, 2 classes. That goes for about 10 minutes, and then we move back to our own classes to do the workshop time. So that's been really good, because that then makes sure that my fellow teacher Ra and I are having those conversations to make sure, right, this is the mental text we're using today. Let's talk about how it can connect to our reading and our writing focus for today. Or we might say, oh, that one's not really going to connect to the mental text. I reckon we could leave that one for when we want to do this, and then having those conversations. So it has brought our conversations a lot more based around the literacy as well, which has been good.
And I was going to ask that, and what have you noticed about the students?
Yeah.
Are you noticing them being more, verbal about the connections that they are seeing?
Yeah, like literally a couple of weeks ago we did something in writing, and then we did that, a writing task, and off they went back to their classes. Then we swapped over for reading, and literally one of the girls brought up to me and she said, I can see it in my book here, like the concept that we're learning. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she'd already made the connection that, I think it was a language feature, and she thought, I know why they use that in that book now, because I learnt that in writing 2 days ago. So they are definitely starting to see, and that probably has taken, 6 months to get to that. It wasn't something that happened immediately, but they're definitely starting to make those connections now, which is really nice to see.
Yeah. And that comes too with the intentionality of the language you're using, and really as a whole school, you're building it as a whole school piece, language, and, even that word noticings that we use.
That's a big word that we're focusing on.
Yes, teacher noticings and student noticings. That comes up regularly on anchor charts, or on the good reader, good writer in learning intentions that you're writing. This is jumping back to when you do a little display for a unit and you're bringing mentor texts in, you'll often bring in other texts too. Is that true? Do you bring in let's say you're doing say it's historical narratives and you've got X number of mentor texts, but then would you get them collecting from the library?
Yes,
other books that could fit in there.
Yeah, and some of them will mention like books that they have read before that they think would fit in. We go down to the library, those types of things.
Yes. Yeah, nice. And I do remember seeing, like in Rick's class last year, I can't remember what the topic was, but children were bringing in examples from home.
Yeah. Which is really nice to see that they're actually connecting it outside the classroom.
Yes, and that it isn't just, it's only the mentor text we're working with, that's just that's the launching pad, isn't it? And it's not confined to that alone, but that there is a set of things there that can be the launch pad for teacher and for unit and for students to get going. And I think that's the thing, that the more students are noticing those things, the more they are making the connections now to go, I know another book that fits in there, or new
sometimes
book
they're even
out,
reading a book in their like independent reading time. They go, actually, this fits under here. Or sometimes they'll think, abandon that book and I want to read something under that genre now. So they'll go and find something else to connect to it as well. So that's really nice to see.
So really expanding their world into noticing different types of texts that they might not necessarily have been as aware of before, or even, as you say, as language features that they see. So text structures and features that they are what we sometimes call, that reading like the writer, noticing those things and going, this is what this is. So there's real, that empowerment for them of doing the noticing themselves and not just waiting to be told it's a this or a that, or it's got to be labelled a this or a that. Yeah. Excellent. All right, so Kate, in this wonderful dual role of literacy facilitator and classroom teacher, and so seeing this from both sides of it, what would be your top tips for if teachers were beginning with using mentor texts? And we're talking about mentor text here in terms of a text type, not just a mentor text as a one-off piece. But what would be your top tips for starting? I've got this unit and off I go. How would I get going with that?
Obviously at our school has been great because we've got the box of books to get started. I know that's not always the case, but I would say by starting with one book, try not to over cater for yourself and start with the 5 or 6. Get one book and make yourself a little bit familiar with it would be a really good start. And just, I guess, remember that you don't have to do the whole book. So if you're looking at one feature that you are trying to teach the students or get them to immerse themselves in, pick a book that suits that language feature or that comprehension strategy or whatever it is that you're doing, and just signal down into that one part of the book rather than trying to see a whole book. Another way that we did it within one unit, which got us going, was using our class novel. So using something that is ongoing all the time, and that way when you're reading all the time, you then think, can reflect back, I remember back in chapter 2 when it did that comprehension, I could use that then. So if your text is ongoing, don't be afraid to go back to pieces that you've read previously, would be another tip. And then my other one would be, like I know I touched on before, but definitely make yourself familiar with the book. And I know for some people that, it's quite an extended text, but the more that you're familiar with it, the more that you're going to start to find different strategies and elements to teach the students as well. So start small and then build up your confidence to deliver it, and then build up your mental text numbers from there. Nice.
And I think there's 2 really big points in there too, about that when we use a text, we don't have to be using the whole text.
Correct.
But we can have time. Well, let's say it's a picture book, for example. It's nice to have read the whole text at some point, but then I just need to come back to the piece that I want to highlight from there, so that it's not I have to read the whole book and now we look at this part of the text, and neither do we don't know this book, but I'm just pulling this little bit out, isn't really as effective either, because then it's not within the context of it. And I think I love that you said that, about building confidence, about using books. And I think when we as teachers get to know more books, we can become more confident in knowing every book is actually going to give us a lot of things.
I think you made the statement before about reading like a writer. Once you kind of start doing it, you do start doing that when you're reading it to the students, that you do start thinking about, I could link that in with that writing. And so making those connections, I think that's been a mental shift, and I think that's something that is easily able to be done like as a beginning as you're starting to trial this system as well.
Yes. And actually there's 2 things we've touched on just then when you were talking about comprehension too. I think if, when literacy leaders can help teachers and also know what, if we're going to be teaching comprehension through, using literature, what comprehension strategies are we, what are the main comprehension strategies we're teaching so that we can know that actually I can do those with any book.
Absolutely.
I don't have to be thinking, that comprehension strategy, which book? Just like our students need to know, comprehension strategies, I need that for anything I'm reading. Yeah. And I think the same thing with the traits, the writing traits, that we don't have to be thinking, which book will I choose to teach word choice? Yeah. Because the writing traits are called the writing traits because that's what the writer's doing for every piece of writing, that the 6+1 that we talk about, so the ideas, organisation, word choice, voice, sentence fluency, presentation, got the 7, yes, they're there in every book. Yep. And I think that's also so powerful for our children to know that, okay, any writer is thinking about all of those things. And so me as a writer, I'm thinking about all of those things.
Yep.
And that's what you're giving them, that rich chance to do for every unit that they do.
Yeah.
They're thinking of those things fully, not just, all right, we're only thinking about this aspect now and then that's, we don't touch on it again until later. So that lovely fullness of using text and knowing, like I absolutely agree that the read aloud that we use is the book that we can draw on the most, especially for our older students. Yep. If we've got that book on the go, then we're really fully being able to go, listen to the voice here and listen to the word choice here and getting multiple noticings of those things across
and doing
text.
It outside your reading time also when you're doing it as a read aloud, and you pick your book up for 10 minutes at the end of the day, like you can always keep making connections then outside the lessons as well.
Yes. And isn't that the power of it, that it isn't just when we say, how do we fit all of this in?
Yeah.
Because there is a thread of that through, it can be at any time, but intentional.
And sometimes, like, obviously I'm at the older end, but I've definitely heard from...
Not personally.
Teaching-wise, age-wise. From the teachers of the younger year levels as well, is the students noticing. So it's not always you having to think about, what's going to come out of this. You might stop and think, what did you notice to the class? And they could say, they used this word, or, right, well, that's a good word choice, isn't it? So get them to do some of the teaching, so to say, as well, and get them to share their noticings. And, as you start doing it, modelling it more to them, they're going to be able to take over that as well. Yeah,
that's another top tip.
Yeah.
Okay? That idea of, noticings are so important, and that's the confidence that we get to not have to, we can trust the book, and any of us as readers can be doing the noticing.
Yep.
And it is just so incredible what 4-year-olds notice, what 14-year-olds, that the noticings
everyone's able to stop and notice something.
Yes.
Whether it's in an image or whether it's a word they heard. There's always,
or how words were put together, or the rhythm we heard in that phrase.
So get them to guide some of the noticings and thinking. I think is definitely another tip.
And I think, in that inquiring sort of way, we can also add in, you use charts. You catch a lot of student thinking and really acknowledge what students are noticing and discovering, through you actually use A2.
So all the teachers
books
have got their own reading and writing journal. So basically, like the students, ours aren't lined, theirs are, but we do all our statements. So our good reader, good writer statements in there, and then we capture all the thinking in there as well. And a lot of classes now capture what the student's saying, and we name the student next to it. So they love that their name's up there and that's their idea. And, it doesn't always have to be 100% right, but it's their noticings and it's what they're seeing. And sometimes it's something that no one else sees, and they're, putting a perspective onto that as well. So that's been a shift in our delivery and of teaching, I think, as well.
Yes, yeah. And that's pretty powerful, those catching
and being able to go back to them.
Flick
back a page, like, you're teaching one page, like someone will go, I remember it's similar to when we were doing similes. So then we skip back to when we were looking at comparative similes. I can see the connection. So being able to do that on the spot as well has been great, rather than trying to get your PowerPoint and find back to that PowerPoint that you did 2 weeks ago. So capturing on the anchor charts has definitely connected that thinking.
Yes, yeah. And whilst you call them anchor charts, you actually keep them in a book, which is just another great, because it just means that pages can be open for everyone to see because they're big enough, you know, have them on your easels or, But do you find students will, you can reference them as group, as a class, but do you ever find students referencing back?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely, all the time.
Yeah. And that's what keeps it all alive and all that thinking happening, doesn't it? Because when we can say, you know what, I've just noticed something we were talking about the other day. Here's another example. Let's put it in. And I think for the older students too, you've started talking about that sometimes students will set up their own pages in their writer's notebook or their reader's notebook of collecting those things too, so that they've got their own ongoing collections of things.
Take a bit of ownership of that learning as well.
Yeah. All right, so connecting tools and resources. Well, we've talked about that really. Literature as resource, tools, anchor charts, the books, displays. We could give Booktopia a little plug here for their helpfulness. They have been pretty remarkable.
Very helpful to get me started.
Yes.
And from there, it was probably the first couple of units that they helped me, gave me a list of a few recommended texts. But I have spoken to them since and said, like, this is definitely a niche market. Like, if you are going to do this, there'll be plenty of teachers that will jump on board and purchase books if you're giving them those mentor text ideas. So I think they're working on that a little bit. They might want to grab my list, but at the moment it's just for my school.
Yeah, it could be a few other people going, I wouldn't mind your list, Kate, but yes. Yeah. And I think part of what is important about what we're saying today too is the fact that when somebody does take it on, it brings a whole lot of knowledge to the school. Yep. It's a really powerful resource in you being the one having gone through that process, you know, to be able to, when you do your staff meetings, to talk with staff about how we've come there, but how you incorporate their ideas and how you bring all of that. There can be a bit of coordination around it.
Yeah, and there probably needs to be someone that does coordinate it a little bit to have that end focus in mind. And then I guess you can say it delegate, but I think, you know, I don't really need to because they're happy to buy into it anyway and be a part of the process. So it doesn't really feel like I'm delegating out the jobs. It's those people wanting to help out and take on that for their own knowledge or personal growth as well.
Yes, yeah. And of course, people who have got a local bookshop that has children's section.
We got a lot from secondhand stores as well to get us started. So we did a little bit of, teachers went out and had a bit of a look around in their local areas as well. So, you know, that's very valuable resource there.
Yes. Yeah, that's it, to go and to know what you're going to look for.
Yeah.
Is, you know, that's the nice thing, because there are a lot of good things.
Yeah. And I think with the, you know, the secondhand stores, that you can't just type in a title and go and find it. You actually have to read through, this would suit this or this would suit this. So you're learning in that aspect as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And the more we as teachers know about literature for our children, the more we can bring to that. And I think that really does build confidence in using literature much more powerfully with our students, where we go, I know what this is bringing to my students, and I know what it is that we can work with here, but not have it all set in stone already. Just, you know, opening those doors to say, let's do the noticings.
Yeah. That's been a big term at our school that we've been doing.
Yes. All right, so when we talk about, would we say top tips for teaching with literature, anything we want to finish up on, Kate?
I would say just get in and give it a go. I think you're only going to build your own confidence if you start having a look at these texts and sharing them with the students and allowing them to share their noticings with you. I think it's been, you know, my biggest learning curve.
Yes, yeah. Fabulous. Just have a little sum up of, as readers and writers in your school, your students as readers and writers within a world of literature. Now, what would we say about them? What if they didn't have literature now? What do you think you'd notice? Maybe maybe a year into it now, it's just not, you can't even tell the difference.
Yeah, trying to think back what it was like when we didn't have it.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot more based on the teacher individual and what they were interested in, what they wanted to do. But by bringing in all those different literature texts, they're able to see a wider range of the way things are written or the way what they read. Prior to that, with our reading and writing cycles, it was very much like the teacher found what they wanted and, you know, a little bit more focused on that way. Whereas I find now it's probably they've got a vaster range of knowledge and access.
Yeah.
It's probably
and access. Yeah. That access is huge. All right. I won't we will finish up there, Kate. I won't throw any more curlies. Not that.
Good one to finish on.
Anyway, no. Always love all of the energy that you bring to this, Kate. Great. Like I said, you know, it was like, do you know what, Kate? Well, you know, your teachers are going to need books with this, and, you know, big job that you took on with such leadership, you know, really set about learning about how to do this for yourself, where you could find out who you could ask, and the reading that you did, even if in reading reviews of things, you know, to start making what were the best choices right near, but I think you also summed up by saying, you just got to get in there and do it.
You do, yeah.
Because getting in there and doing it, it's great. You can hardly remember what it was like before because this is now the way of being.
I can't imagine you going back to what we used to do now.
Yeah.
And what it would be like without them in there.
Yes, yeah. So in less than a year,
yeah,
it's a different culture around the importance and the place of literature in your students' reading and writing lives. Yeah. All right, I won't do another wrap up. I'll thank everyone for joining us today. We love to see that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teacher's Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. You'll receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events and ways to contact us. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everybody.
Pleasure.
All the best to you, Kate, and to all of our listeners. Until next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.